There are 3 keys to becoming wealthy. You got to spend less, then you got to earn more, and you got to invest like crazy. Now, while these 3 keys are simple to understand, actually implementing them is a lot more difficult. We're going to be going over how to invest your money in different places deeper in this quest. So I'm not going to go too deep into that in this lesson, but let's talk about now, how do you spend less the right way? Because, well, it might seem like a pretty intuitive thing, right? Just don't spend all of your money. Well, what ends up happening to a lot of people is most people have no idea of what's actually happening with their money. So now what I'd like you to do to start this lesson is actually grade yourself. And this one's not always the funnest thing, because when I was in school, I didn't really like getting my grades back all the time, but we're going to do that now. So what I'd like you to start with is get a piece of paper, get a Google sheet, get an Excel sheet, does not matter. And I want you to start by writing down how much money you made last month and all the different sources of your income, whether it's your business, whether it's your job, whether it's your investments. Write them down and write line by line where that money came in from. That's your income part. Below that now, I want you to write your expenses, and you have to do this correctly if you want this to work. So go get your credit card statements, your debit card statements, your bank statements. You have to do this correctly if you want this exercise to work. Now, what I want you to do is line by line, write down every single one of your expenses. And if you do it on the computer, if you use a Google sheet or an Excel sheet, it's a little bit easier because then you can categorize them. But I'd like you to write down each one of your expenses and then categorize them by how much money was eating out, how much money was spent on entertainment, how much money was spent on your housing costs, how much money was spent on clothing and shopping. Now, when you write this down at the bottom, I want you to write how much money is left over after these expenses. Once you do that, that's where I want you to write how much money did you invest? Where did you invest it, if any? How much money did you save? Where did you save it, if any? And how much money did you give to charity, if any? Now, when you see this, the first thing that's going to happen, I can guarantee you, is you are going to immediately find places where you realize that you were overspending or shouldn't be spending, or maybe you'll find a subscription or two that, well, you didn't realize that you still had. In business, what we say is if you cannot track it, you cannot optimize it. And it's the exact same thing with your money. Most people have no idea of what's going on with their money. In fact, the way that the financial statement looks like for the majority of people is the majority of people make money, they spend money, and then they wonder where all their money went. And if you want to become wealthy, well, you have to be able to invest money, which means you need more money to invest. And that just starts by being able to track where all of your money is going. So now when you look at this, the first thing that's going to happen is you're going to find expenses that you didn't know that you still had. And you're going to see that maybe you were overspending in certain places. Maybe you went to too many restaurants. Maybe you're spending too much money on clothes. Maybe you're spending too much money on your car and maintenance or detailing or whatever it might be. That's a very quick and easy place where you can start cutting back. The second thing that you can start doing to start cutting back is negotiate some of your bills lower. This is often an overlooked thing that you can do to reduce your expenses. And I think part of the reason for that, or it has to do with the fact of where you grow up. Because in certain parts of the world, for example, if I go to India tomorrow and I wanted to buy apples, I'm going to negotiate the price of the apples on the street. In America, if you go to buy apples, you're not negotiating the price of apples at Walmart. You buy whatever the list price is. And so depending on where you are in the world, you might not be accustomed to negotiating the prices of things, but when it comes to certain bills and certain utilities and certain, well, subscriptions, they are negotiable. And so now what I'd like you to do is take a look at some of your bills, maybe your cell phone bill, maybe your internet bill, whatever other utility bills that you have that you've kind of slowly seen creeping up in price, because what a lot of times these service providers will do is they'll just keep jacking up your prices and hoping you won't change service providers. But what you can do now is use this to your advantage. Look at which service providers that you can potentially negotiate the prices on. Look at who their competitors are. See what their introductory prices are. And then I want you to call up the customer service office. And I want you to ask them nicely, and I'll explain why in just a minute. But I want you to ask them, hey, I saw that my bill is now $105 a month. I know it used to be $75 a month. Do you know why? And you want to come off kind of like you're clueless. This is all an art here. Then they might explain it, and they might off the bat say, you know what, we have a little promotion going on because you called that we can reduce it to $95 a month. Are you interested? They might offer that, they might not. Once you ask them why they raised the prices, that's when you have to ask them, well, is there anything that you could do to help lower the price? Because it's a little bit pricey for me. And again, we're doing this in an artistic way. We're not going off and saying, hey, you need to lower the prices of my product, of my service, of my whatever, because these customer service reps are being yelled at and cussed out day in and day out. And so if you're nice to them, they'll be nice to your wallet. Now, maybe they'll be able to work with you here. But then the next thing, this is where we're now going to use a little bit of leverage, is you say, oh, okay, I appreciate you working with me, but I'm looking at your competitor and they're charging $65 a month on this intro offer. And I'd love to stay with you. I've been a loyal customer for a long time. Is there anything that you can do? Now you're putting pressure on them because companies don't want to lose a loyal customer over $10, $20, $30, $40 a month. And this is where they're going to have a lot more reason to want to lower their price. Once you do that, when they're still not done yet, once they hopefully come back and lower the price, here's what you say. Oh, thank you, but unfortunately, I don't know if that's going to be enough. No matter how much of a discount they give you, you do not accept it yet because you still haven't offered a price. You still got to do your own negotiating. I know this isn't a lesson on negotiating 101, but we're going to do a little bit of negotiating exercises. Once they offer something, that's when you make your first offer. If you go out and you say, hey, my bill's $105 a month, can you bring it down to $85 a month? You've anchored yourself. What if they were willing to go down to $65? You don't know that yet. So you want them to negotiate against themselves before you go out and start negotiating yourself. So after they hopefully bring the price down, some of them will work, some service providers won't. This is kind of the name of the game. Some of my students have told me that they've been able to save hundreds of dollars a month doing this, because they call every service provider that they have and they can lower the bills by $20, $30, $50, $70 a month, depending on what it is and depending on how long you've been a client. And if you do this enough times, well, you can save a decent amount of money. That's when you go out and you make an offer on a price. You say, okay, thank you for bringing it down to 85. Can you bring it down to 75? And if they say no, this is where you then nicely ask to speak with the manager. The key, again, is nicely, because these customer service reps are going through the ringer. They are being yelled at and cussed out a lot. And so if you are nice to them, they will be nice to your bank account. So now you've built this tracker. You're looking at what's going on with their money. Now you'll find places that you can cut out. The second thing that you can do, which doesn't change anything in your lifestyle, is you're just going to try to negotiate some of your bills lower. The next thing that you have to do is really take a look at your life and see, are you spending money the right way? And the reason why I'm saying it this way is because, well, most people follow what I call a net zero mindset. And I came up with this idea of net zero when I was guest teaching in Detroit public schools. Detroit public schools are kind of a rougher school district. And before I really started making videos on YouTube about financial education, I was guest teaching in Detroit about money, leadership, motivation, just general life lessons. And one of the things that I learned was that the students here were all very hardworking, and nearly all of them had a job, and nearly none of them had a bank account. And this got me thinking. And I would ask the students, well, what are you doing with the money that you're getting from your job? Because these are, again, high school kids, working jobs, making money, but didn't know what to do with the money. And so these kids would now go and get a physical check from their boss, and then they would take this physical check, go to a liquor store, cash the check. Now the liquor store owner would take 1 to 10% of the check, and then they would take whatever cash they had left, and then on the way out of this convenience store of this liquor store, they would buy a bunch of candy, soda, pop, junk, and by the time they had left the convenience store, they'd only have half that paycheck left, and then that money would be spent way before the next paycheck even came in. And so many people grow up with this net zero mindset, which is, if I have $1,000 in my bank account, I can spend $1,000. But what you're going to learn is there's a big difference between being able to buy something and being able to actually afford something. And the reason why so many people are broke financially is because they buy what they think they can afford but they can really just buy it. It's very easy to buy things. I mean, you can go into pretty much any store nowadays, and even if you have $50 in your bank account, you can buy a $2,000 purse, you can buy a $2,000 laptop, you can buy a $2,000 TV, thanks to the help of easy credit cards, easy financing. But just because you can buy something does not mean that you can afford it, which is why for the majority of people, when they think that I can buy something, they think I can afford to make the monthly payments, but that's not actually affording something. So this is where I want you to understand the difference between an asset and a liability. An asset is something that puts money in your pocket. When you go out and you start a business, that's an asset. When you go out and you buy a rental property, that's an asset. When you go out and you invest in stocks, that's an asset. You're buying this thing for the sole purpose of making more money. But when you go out and you buy a car to drive, that's a liability. It's losing you money. When you go out and you buy clothes, that's a liability. When you go on a vacation, that's a liability. When you go out and you buy these nice things, which most people assume makes them look richer, right? Because when you drive a BMW, that makes you look richer than if you're driving a Toyota. But what's ironic is many times these liabilities that you're buying is making somebody else rich, even though you look like you're rich. When you go out and you wear the luxury brand name clothes, you look like you're rich, but the only person that you're making rich is the person who owns that company. In fact, one of the richest people in the world is the CEO of Louis Vuitton, Bernard Arnault. And the reason why he became one of the richest people in the world is because people want to pay to look like they're rich before they're actually rich. And so now if you understand the difference between an asset and a liability, then you can understand if you want to become wealthy, you have to own more assets, right? Spend less, earn more, invest like crazy. You want to invest like crazy to owning these assets. But that means that when it comes to spending money on these liabilities, you have to also spend a little bit smarter on these liabilities. Because now, if you are financing a bunch of liabilities, it's going to be impossible for you to build wealth because now you're spending your future income on today's liabilities. Debt financing means you're spending tomorrow's income today, and then you got to pay that back plus interest. That's what debt is. Debt is you spending tomorrow's income. And if you're spending tomorrow's income to buy something that's losing you money, now you got a double whammy. Not only did you buy something that's losing you money, but now you have to pay interest on something that's losing you money. And so now, if you want to understand the difference of being able to buy something and being able to afford something when it comes to liabilities, that means now you have to understand how can you actually afford to buy something. But in order to be able to afford it, number one, you cannot follow this net zero thinking, which means you cannot spend all of your money. A simple rule of thumb that I like to follow for liabilities that I do not need to survive is my rule of 5, which says that if you cannot buy 5 of them, you cannot afford 1 of them. If I want to go and buy a $1,000 phone, if I don't have $5,000 saved up to go out and spend and buy this phone, I cannot actually afford this phone. And the reason why I follow this method is so I don't accidentally spend all of my money. Because when you live with this net zero thinking of you can just spend $1,000 if you got $1,000, you're going to constantly be playing this game of trying to buy. And I want you to be able to have the nice things, but I want you to be able to afford them first. So the way that you do this now is you're going to start by building this spreadsheet. You're going to start by building this model of what your finances look like today. That way you can start making some quick changes by either spending less, by negotiating some of your bills so you have some more money. Then you have to understand the difference between an asset and a liability because our goal is going to be how do you own more assets. Later on in this quest, I'm going to be going over how do you invest your money in different investing strategies there. But now when it comes to liabilities, when you spend money on liabilities, because everybody has to have liabilities, it's nice to have nice liabilities, but you want to make sure you can afford them first and not go into debt to buy these liabilities. So that means no more going into consumer debt to buy these liabilities, except maybe buying a home to live in. But besides that, no more debt for these liabilities. You have to be able to afford them, not just be able to make the monthly payments. Now, when it comes to actually being able to afford a liability, that's where now you want to make sure you follow something like the rule of 5, which is, well, if you can't buy 5 of them, you can't afford 1 of them. If you cannot follow the rule of 5 yet, that's okay. Work your way there. Maybe start with the rule of 2, then maybe work your way to a rule of 3, then a rule of 4, then a rule of 5. But the key here now is you're not following the net zero mindset, because if you spend all of your money, well, you're never, ever, ever going to have a chance to become wealthy. Because at the end of the day, wealth is a numbers game. And the more money you have to invest, the more money you have to buy assets, the wealthier you will become. Your action steps for this lesson are number 1, build your financial spreadsheet. See what your money looks like. Now, this is going to take a little bit of time. This could take you 30 minutes. It could take you 60 minutes. It could take you 2 hours, depending on how accessible all the information is. But please spend the time doing this because it is going to help guide you through the rest of your financial journey. Because if you cannot track where your money is going, you cannot optimize your money. The second thing that I want you to do is take a look at your financial spreadsheet and see where you can cut back on some expenses, especially if you need more money. See where you can cut back on expenses. The third thing that I want you to do is I want you to potentially negotiate some of your bills lower. Call up these customer service representatives for the services that you have and see if you can negotiate the prices of your bills. Remember, the worst they can say is no. And then the fourth thing that I want you to do is really just think about now, how are you spending your money? Are you financing things to look like you have more wealth than you do? And if so, how can you start changing the way that you spend your money? And with that, I'll see you in the next lesson.